so this theory goes back to that ancient memory of superiority. And for the poor, in 1873, Galton wrote, "I do not see why any insolence of caste should prevent the gifted class, when they had the power, from treating their lower caste compatriots with all kindness, so long as they maintain celibacy. But if these continue to procreate children inferior in moral, intellectual, and physical qualities, it is easy to believe that the time may come when such persons would be considered as enemies of the state and to have forfeited all claims to kindness." Can you imagine the nerve? We'll be kind to the poor people as long as they maintain celibacy and do not multiply themselves. But when they multiply themselves, we have a right inherent in our superior estate to withdraw all kindness, that is support, medical supplies, or any type of assistance to help them to evolve out of their condition. Galton's, quote, "scientific truths" were so profound to him that he concluded that enthusiasm to improve the race is so noble in its aims that it might well give rise to a sense of religious obligation. In other words, fanaticism. Fanaticism engendered and increased by hatred. No doubt Marx, with his scientific socialism, his love of the leadership class, the dictatorship of the proletariat, and his disdain for what he called the lumpen proletariat, the lowest class, whom he called those passively rotting masses, felt the same way. Marx is in a class by himself among the Nephilim, and he had utter disdain for the very ones for whom he was proclaiming his communist revolution. He hated the masses. He used them to his own designs, and he called them the passively rotting masses. Great benefactor of the Soviet Union is a people hater. As early as 1912, fervent adherents of Galton's eugenic creed included both Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Harold Laski in England, Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the United States, and soon scores of others throughout the upper echelons of American and English society. The nations which were ultimately most influenced by Galton's doctrines were the United States and Nazi Germany. Charles Darwin did not apply his theory to human society in a systematic form. That was done by Herbert Spencer, another archdeceiver in this chain. Spencer, S-P-E-N-C-E-R, a philosopher whose impact on modern society is widely underestimated. All the serpents are underestimated because he is considered of little importance today. By the time Darwin had published Origin of Species, Spencer had already written along evolutionary lines in his essay, Progress, Its Law and Cause, published in 1857. It was Spencer, not Darwin, who coined the term survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest. It's commonly used in conversation today. It has an insidious point. It means the super race has the right to survive, since they are obviously the fittest. They have a right to survive inherent in nature's laws, and therefore one must not interfere with the non-survival of those who are not fit. According to Spencer, life progressed from an incoherent homogeneity, which meant that all life existed in the small uniform particles like the protozoa, to a coherent heterogeneity where there are dissimilar constituents such as the higher animals and man. The final result of this process was a civil society. Spencer held that an unknown and unknowable absolute force was continuously operating on the material world and producing variety, coherence, integration, specialization, and individuation. Gases concentrated to form planets, the earth became more variegated and gave birth to such simple animals as the amoeba. Man evolved from less complex species and at first lived in undifferentiated hordes. Various social functions were developed so that there were priests, kings, scholars, workers, and so forth. and knowledge was differentiated into the various sciences. In short, along with all other changing things, human societies evolved from undifferentiated hordes by means of increasing division of labor into complex civilizations. Spencer believed the social order evolved along the same lines as the biological order. He applied the principles of biological evolution to the social spheres. This became known as social Darwinism. During the late 19th century, Spencer's ideas were used to justify the wealth of the elite and the poverty of the lower classes as the outworking of natural law, the survival of the fittest. According to Spencer, biological evolution had occurred through the unregulated competition of individual organisms and species for the scarce necessities of life. Unfit individuals and unadaptable species died or became extinct, leading to vigorous species and the eventual emergence of man. In just such a manner, reasoned Spencer, unregulated competition among men had led to social and economic progress and the rise of the most able to positions of power and eminence. For progress to continue, unregulated competition must continue. So those at the bottom of the social ladder were there because they were inferior or unfit to engage in social life. To aid them would retard their extinction, hence retard progress itself. This becomes a rationale for anti-love and the failure to uplift those who have less ability than oneself. Spencer offered an evolutionary rationale for low wages and subhuman working and living conditions. Galton offered hereditary reasons in the natural laws of biology for not wasting sympathy, money, education, and above all, health care on biologically low-class types. Beginning at the turn of the century, the robber barons, the social Darwinists, and the eugenicists, whose American societies and circles had interchangeable directorates and memberships, started to press for the compulsory sterilization of the mentally ill, the feeble-minded, the epileptics, habitual paupers and criminals, and other dysgenic types, those whose genes are detrimental to the hereditary qualities of a stock or are biologically defective or deficient. At this stage, the power elite, by blending the doctrine of Spencer and Galton, which carried with them the drift of Darwin and Malthus, had within the framework of their social conscience a justification for their superiority, which not only sanctified their urges for power, but demonstrated that they were part of a natural process created by God. One thing that you need to understand about the fallen ones is that they have never admitted their own descent in the order of hierarchy, nor have they admitted the ascent of the sons of God. They will not acknowledge the sons of God as above them in hierarchy, laying claim to their status in the hierarchy of angels before their fall. When they lost their position, they are not accepting the judgment of God, where they were cast out of heaven and cast down into the earth. You have to understand this in the psychology of the Nephilim. The power elite have never accepted the judgment put upon them by Almighty God.